Go out and find your community, find the place or the places, the career that's right for you, not that's going to make you the most money, because happiness is not a thing you can buy.
Mhm.
Happiness is in here. And when you find it, it's because you're following your inner voice as opposed to, I need to make more money.
You're listening to Let's Talk Passion and Purpose with Nicole Thomas. In this episode, I sit down with Patrick Schmidt, a Pittsburgh based artist and educator making bold, geometric work that's hard to ignore. Inspired by everyday patterns like wallpaper and textiles, he creates vibrant digital pieces that blur the line between analog and digital. Patrick has exhibited across the US and Europe and completed major public installations, including a 250-foot tape mural for Art Prize on the Grand Rapids Public Museum, a room-sized piece at Pittsburgh Center for the Arts, and a permanent mural at the Pittsburgh International Airport. Patrick's art is held in private and corporate collections throughout the US, Europe, and Russia, with one of his pieces featured in House Beautiful magazine.
I think if people find their passion, even if you find it later in life, whatever that means, it's never too late to turn and do something different.
In this episode, Patrick shares how he went from almost becoming a music major to discovering his true calling in visual art, how his unique visual language developed over decades, and what it takes to balance a serious studio practice with teaching, health, and everyday life. We also talk about failure, doubt, and why it's never too late to turn toward the work you really want to do. If you're an artist or creative trying to figure out how to make this a long-term reality, this episode is for you. Patrick, welcome to the
Thank
show.
you.
So
Thank
excited
you.
to have you here. So let's start at the beginning. What first pulled you into the world of art? And was there a moment when you realized this was your calling?
Actually, I can remember the day. I don't remember what day of the week it was, but I started life off thinking I was going to be a music major. And I hadn't l- played piano since a very young age. I didn't play an instrument from a very young age. And it was literally this uphill battle. Um, and my compositions were very unorthodox, and probably I should have been sent to the art department right from the get-go, but I wasn't. Like, let's drop glass on the floor and start a musical composition with that. And they were like, no. So I was in registering for classes, and I needed to fill a slot, and this drawing course came up. And I was like, I want to do this. So I
Mhm.
took this drawing course, and literally second, third week, we were literally drawing toilet tissue just piled up, to get
Oh,
perspective, to get angling, and everything literally just clicked.
wow.
And the light bulb goes on, and I saw my life literally moving forward. It was like all right there. It was okay. This is what I'm supposed to do. I can eat ramen noodles and box macaroni and cheese if I have to, and I'm just gonna go with it. And I never really looked back.
Your work is deeply connected to color, pattern, and perception. When did you begin developing your signature visual language? Because I find
Um,
that completely fascinating. The alphabet, just amazing.
So, when I entered graduate school, my work I was doing a lot of stencils, and I would cut them out of file folders and just spray paint them onto the canvas. And then I would collage things in, and I would write things on the canvas. And, it was kind of abstract expressionist slash graffiti slash something that we really didn't have a definition for. And, my first week in graduate school, there was a couple of comments from the faculty, it was basically, we've kind of seen this before. And I was like, okay, that's not good. So I kind of removed everything, and I was doing this painting, and it for me, it was a really lovely abstract painting. but it was missing something.
Mhm.
And my faculty advisor comes in. He's like, "Beautiful painting. It should sit above my sofa." And it was meant as a dig.
Oh.
um, like it's very decorative. So now what are you going to do with it? So okay. So I got out my manila folders again, and I cut a banana stencil and I painted a series of bananas across the bottom. Because it was blue and I wanted something yellow. So, okay, let's do this. And he came in the next day and he was like, okay, all right. You need to go to here, here, and here and get samples of wallpaper, of fabric, of this, of this, of this, of this, of this. I'll see you tomorrow. And so, it's like, okay. So I ran out and I got all of this stuff and we started talking about what what pattern means and historically versus, what does it mean today? What does patterns mean in the Midwest of the United States versus the East Coast versus someplace else in the world? So essentially, I had to go to the library and start doing research and really looking at um, um, patterns from literally Islamic patterns and how the mathematics behind it, and how in a Islamic mosque you don't have imagery, you have patterns. It's a place
Mm.
of focus, it's a place of meditation, which then got me into Buddhist thinking and Buddhism and the philosophy. And that took me to looking at just all sorts of, I looked at Russian constructivism and how Russia used patterns as propaganda. So all of a sudden now there's
Wow.
propaganda involved. And then
Mm-hmm.
I found a book on Chinese patterns and African patterns. And, so I'm now the sponge and I'm just grabbing from every source
Mm-hmm.
possible. And I found these grates that had a pattern. So I'm spray painting them on canvases and okay, not quite
Mm-hmm.
it was still kind of harking back to my graffiti, but I needed to kind of remove myself from that. So then it just was like, okay, let's just play. So I
Mm-hmm.
took literally a semester and I just played. I just like, let's take this and this. And what if
Mm-hmm.
I laid it over top and just what can I do with it? So
Mm-hmm.
transparency started to happen a little bit. Certainly color.
Mm-hmm.
I think wallpaper, American style wallpaper, at least what I was collecting was pretty ugly, just atrociously ugly. And so how can I enliven it? How can I make it
Mm-hmm.
something more? So, okay, in comes color. Let's
Mm-hmm.
make it acid color. Let's play with complements or just colors that aren't quite complements, but when you put them together, one over top of the other, your eye just so, up art has to come in, and
Okay.
how we perceive and then when I began to juxtapose them together, if I if the values were just so, you would begin to sense something happening between the juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was kind of where my senior thesis happened. But along the way, I took a semester and I challenged myself to make the ugliest gaudiest painting I possibly could. Um, and we had this visiting artist from, I think it was Oberlin, but
Mm-hmm.
neither here nor there. And he walks in and he was just like, these are really amazing. They're ugly, but they were strong and they were powerful. And it's really, he was just like, these are blowing me away. Um, and I've had, and when I started to show them out off of campus, I had a lot of, I remember showing them in Kansas City and a gallerist came in and went, these are just amazing. I can't sell these. Few people are going to put these on their wall,
All right.
but these
So
are
they're
amazing
awesome, but
paintings.
they're amazing.
So with tears in my eyes, you kind of scurry back to the studio and
Hmm.
figure out, okay, now what? And then at some point, um, I got a hold of Photoshop. And so I had stacks. Every time I got a new pattern, I would take it to the art department and I would photocopy it and I would make it large. I would shrink it so I could manipulate it and project it. And so now all of a sudden I had to take all of them and scan them into the computer so I had something to play with. And then I started
Hmm.
to um, manipulate them a little. And most of the time, it was just, how can I make new patterns? And um, from there, it was like, rather than juxtaposing, I began to layer.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing about layering is that the wallpaper is based on a 12-inch square. The digital is based on one and zeros, so it's basically a square. And
Hmm.
so I didn't have to think about composition. I didn't have to think about, is this going to work when I put color on it? All I had to figure out is the balancing of, oh, there's a passage here. How can I fill this passage in or overlap it and construct and really construct the image as opposed to, yeah, I can just put this here, and it's going to work. Um,
Hmm.
I was looking at or studying a lot of Ellsworth Kelly, Mondrian. I was getting into the pattern and decoration people, thinking about identity and how all
Hmm.
of these images, all of these patterns, in a way, represents a kind of identity, whether it's a social
Hmm.
political, whether it's an economic, whether it's a, whatever. Um, but but when you put them together, something else happens. When you lay them one over top of the other, something else happens. When you
Hmm.
digitize them, it becomes more of a universal image as opposed to an individual. So
Hmm.
I was looking at the individual, then I took the individual out and looked more globally, if you will. And so that started building. Those
Hmm.
images, though, literally, um, I began to tape everything off because the edges needed to be sharp. And the process was a 6 month to 18-month process from start to finish. On something even 24-inch square, it was a really long time. And, in school, you don't have that kind of luxury. Outside
Hmm.
of school, yeah, okay. In academia, and maybe because I was when I started teaching, I could, it took that long just because I had other things that I had to focus my attention on, even though I
Hmm.
was still working 30 plus hours in the studio and teaching.
Wow.
Um, so, and then there was a point in time where I read a book called Sculpture in the Age of Doubt.
Hmm.
And it was all about how painting is is dead, but sculpture is very much alive because you can take anything. You don't
Hmm.
have to melt bronze to have a sculpture. You can take junk and weld it together or wire it together
Hmm.
and do
Hmm.
something really fascinating with it. And the material itself has meaning where paint, paint is paint. So you had to create something different. So
Hmm.
I took the challenge and I spent probably 2 or 3 years trying to make a three-dimensional painting. Um, and I did a 10-foot by 10-foot painting based off of 12-inch, where the process for each one was exactly the same. So I put down a color. I then took a sponge and I sponged a second color, and then I sponged a
Hmm.
third color, and then I put a stencil over it, and then I sponged that. Boom.
Wow.
Now I
Hmm.
have a piece, and now I have to do 100 that are all exactly the same, but no two can be alike.
Hmm.
First 25 were good. Second 25 getting a little harder. Third 25 and the last 25, I was not somebody anyone wanted to be around. Just like, okay, this is really hard coming up with that many different color combinations and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't repeat myself. And but I did manage to get through it. And the painting is literally this big,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's how it's stored. Um, but so it could be shown that way, or it can be shown in a 10-foot by 10-foot square. It could be
Mm-hmm.
shown around the perimeter. So it became kind of an installation, and
Mm-hmm.
that the space would dictate how one might show it.
Right, right. Yeah.
And then long story short, some other things happened in my life that I was like, okay, I need to get back to painting.
Mm-hmm.
And again, these works were difficult. They were hard to make it all happen. And then the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic hit.
Oh, yes.
So, we're all feeling isolated and away from everybody. I began to
Mm-hmm.
take literally fragments of these old paintings. So if a painting, was like this big, I'm taking this much of it, really a
Mm-hmm.
small amount, and putting it into another folder in Photoshop, and I'm stretching it and I'm elongating it. So literally, the paintings that I'm doing now
Mm-hmm.
are the children of the paintings I did 8 years ago, 9 years
Wow.
ago, which were
Mm-hmm.
the children of the paintings I did 20 years ago. So
Wow.
there's this lineage of patterns that are
Mm-hmm.
kind of weaving all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And literally within the last month and a
Mm-hmm.
half, I was painting this little thing, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is really boring. I'm just not.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to project a pattern over top of it.
Wow.
So I'm taking things from 20 years ago and literally
Mm-hmm.
reinvesting in them and looking at them. And it's just this amazing, really cool thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I have
Mm-hmm.
like literally 7, 8 that are already in the works.
Wow. I tell you, that's fascinating. Patrick, everything you mentioned is fascinating because everything you shared is the evolution of your work. Can you walk us through your creative process from concept to execution? What does a day in the studio look like for you?
Um, a painting still takes several weeks, if not a month or more. Um, so the process of a painting, I'm going to start off with kind of this idea, like this painting I started yesterday and or the day before. I knew I wanted to incorporate this new 1960-ish esque image in
Mm-hmm.
it. So okay, so it's on the computer, it's in a file. So let's just begin to play. And so I started to take a fragment from an older painting and another fragment and elongate, and then the second layer I make really transparent. So it adds, when you make the second layer transparent, it literally creates a third layer. So now you have these multiple layers that you can begin to, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, what if I put this image here? Just block it. I don't like that. What about it here? I don't like that either. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a process of, yeah, no, I like this, but the rest of it, I could care less about. Um, and all of a sudden I'm like, what if I take all of that away and I take just this first image that I pulled out of this larger painting, and when I squished it together, it was a series of lines, but the color was really, really intense. And normally I just ignore the color and I just let my internal self dictate color. But on this
Mm-hmm.
particular one, I was like, I really, really am attracted to the color in here. So why
Mm-hmm.
don't I see if I can put a large, band of these patterns kind of interspersed with them? And I'm like, this works. And so I'm figuring out how to incorporate it in a variety of different ways.
Wow.
So, so once I figure out that, okay, yep, this is what I'm going to do, then I need to begin to map it out on the canvas. And that could
Hmm.
take, a couple hours to a day, depending on
Hmm.
the size of the canvas or just the complexity of the piece, what I'm going to focus on, what I'm not going to focus on. On most of my work, there is some kind of geometric shape that
Hmm.
I superimpose for to make transparent. Um,
Hmm.
Part of that is kind of a nod to geometric abstraction as a movement, as a presence. It's also an interesting visual that draws people in, but it's
Hmm.
also part of a mandala, a Buddhist or a um, Tibetan mandala or the
Hmm.
Dharma wheel, and how it becomes a place of mindful meditation. There's all of this stuff going on, all of this color going on, but it's very structured because of the digital and the patterns. So it's not chaotic, but there's color
Hmm.
going everywhere. And so that circle, in many cases, the circle is a place to just find your center. So once I have that, then I can begin to put the other layers down and block out. And the pattern might take a lesson in geometry to get it, because there's going to be
Hmm.
lines going in every which direction. And so sometimes I have to put paper over top of it so I don't draw right on the canvas.
Hmm.
It just depends. Now start painting.
And now start, and all of that was preparation,
That was all prep.
all prep. Now, do you have a structure or rhythm when you create, or does your process shift from project to project?
It really depends on, so I'm thinking about color and their combinations and how they speak to without being too much in your face.
Hmm.
So when you look at it before you even understand that there's a word in it, you're going to go, oh, this is quite a lovely piece. And then
Hmm.
once you begin to get into it a little bit more, it begins to, oh, there's color, there's four or five color combinations, in this
Hmm.
one work. How we view color, how we view the color combinations is going to suggest something.
Yes, that's
What it's
very
going to
true.
suggest to you and what it's going to suggest to me may be different, but it's going to give it's going to leave us with something.
Yes, it
Um,
was.
so I'm
Hmm.
I'm really cognizant about um, how color works together.
Hmm.
Easy thing, when I first started really thinking about this, I was thinking, oh, well, what about the color combinations of commercial Americana?
Hmm.
The red and the yellow of
Yes.
McDonald's, right? Mm.
Hmm.
But
Yes, and we talked
if
about this. We
yeah,
discussed this.
but if
Mhm.
you have really sharp edges and shapes that are
Mhm.
really aggressive, those color combinations are really powerful. And that's probably why the designers use them, right?
Mhm.
So let's remove ourselves from too much of that stereotype and really start to think about, oh, let's play with soft greens and yellows and teals versus really strong violets and oranges and
Mhm.
yellows. Okay. Kind of the same, but yet very, very different.
Mhm.
And what happens, I think, or what will happen, I think, is that um, compositionally it's all going to hold together, but you begin to see color communities or color schemes beginning to think about them in terms of color communities, literally living in the same space.
Yeah, that
And
makes
so
sense.
is it a social political commentary? I don't know, but
Mhm.
it's hopefully helping me to understand a better place in the world.
What have been some of the unexpected challenges or even joys that come with creating for public spaces versus more traditional galleries?
Ah,
Especially now that you have color community and just thinking about
yeah.
everything you just mentioned.
You know, I've done these drawing installations with tape for many, many, many years. And the largest one that I was able to do um, was 15 feet tall by 250 feet from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the Grand Rapids Public Museum. They have a carousel, an old antique carousel in a gazebo, glass gazebo that sits out over the Grand River.
Wow.
So, it's this just glass facade that just kind of comes around. It sits literally in the water. So I'm like, okay, I can do something, but I didn't really know what to do. So I went for a visit and I went into the carousel and the lights are on and the music is going and the things are going up and down. And I have this love of carousels. When we take
Uh,
students abroad or even to New York, we came across the carousel in Central Park. I made
mhm.
all of the kids ride with me,
You did.
and we just had a blast, Um, and and it's that feeling of being a kid and the euphoria of the lights and everything going on. And I'm like, okay, how do I try to replicate that feeling
Mhm,
on this glass with tape.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
started off with I went back to music and I found a couple of abstract shapes. One was the natural sign, and I think one was the flat sign. And I just started
mhm,
putting them on windows at various places. And then I took a digital image of think DNA cell kind of, but
mhm,
digital, that went up and down and up and down, as the carousel would go up and down. And then there was just neon crazy lines in every which direction kind of that
mhm,
would come, and then they got really, really, really agitated and really close together. And then as you went around, they got lesser and lesser. And the back of the building, they were like almost gone.
mhm,
So it was about the experience of riding a carousel. Um,
mhm,
it took 7, 10 to 12 hour days on a ladder that's sitting on glass, and I'm praying that I'm not going to go through the glass.
mhm. I
And
can
I
imagine.
didn't. It was done in September, and in Michigan, the days got to 75, 78 degrees, but the nights
Mhm.
dipped down to the low 40s.
Wow.
So the window began to expand and contract, which meant part of the tape was starting to go because the window was forcing it apart.
Mhm, mhm,
So on like day 3 or 4, I had to go find clear tape that was going to adhere to the glass and keep everything in place. And okay, so I go out, emergency trip to, I don't know, Lowe's or something, and buy
mhm.
all of this tape and come back and fix everything. Yeah, it was quite the but the beautiful thing about doing those public things is people
Mhm.
I'm in their space. So it's a
Yeah.
performance, it's an installation,
Mhm,
it's interactive because I'm talking to people. I had this young family come up, and this little boy, he was just fascinated. So I ripped
mhm.
off a piece of tape and I said, "Here, you put it up there and you can participate." So he put it on, and I just went from there. And so it's very engaging. And then as I got closer to being finished, I had another couple who lived up the river a quarter of a mile
Mhm.
come, and they were like, every morning we sit on our balcony and we watch you. This is like the most beautiful thing from a half a mile. And it's just
Wow.
this amazing thing. And so it's on the river. So a half a mile this way, people it's this random
Mhm,
thing. And many, many, many people got to come and see it. It was done during this thing called Art Prize, and like
mhm.
10,000 people over the course of a
Wow.
week show up. And, so
Amazing.
it was kind of cool.
Yes, it sounds like it was cool.
And it took
Amazing.
two of us 3 days to take it down.
Oh, wow. 3
Yeah.
days. Patrick, what's the best piece of advice you've received? about pursuing your passion or staying committed to your craft?
Well, in terms of my work, and I don't know, I've had a lot of, advice along the way. But one that that kind of pops up a number of years ago. Something had come up and I was showing with a friend, and I just made the comment, like it was something less than positive.
Mhm.
And she made the comment that you nobody is doing what you're doing. Nobody. So you need to keep doing it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it was just like, yeah. And I think when we get to those low points, we need to be
Mhm.
told that, yeah, you just keep doing it. Just keep, you don't know when that young little person is going to come in and want to participate, and something will happen. Case in point, when I was a grad student, I had my summer gig. I taught at a music camp. I taught
Mhm.
painting at a music camp, and I had this young student who was just really kind of a funky, cool kid.
Mhm.
And he goes away, and 15-ish years later, he's a painter in New York City.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
he credits his his journey to that summer that we spent together. And it's just like, yes,
Yes.
you don't
Yes.
know, so when you're feeling kind of like, oh, I don't know, you do something and you just keep doing it and you just show up and you do it, and without any expectation. I think when we get down, it's because we're expecting, or I'm expecting to, expecting to have a good show and something is going to sell, and maybe nothing sells. And then with my tail between my legs, I bring it all home, and inevitably somebody then emails me and says, "Yeah, there was this piece I saw, I think online, and I really want to, um, think about getting it." And you're like, "Oh my gosh, how did that
Mhm.
happen?" Um, so I so I don't know, think about the expectations I think that we put on ourselves. I think we all need to chill out a little bit. And maybe I'm saying that more for me, but I think I see that in my students, that they're expecting greatness, um,
Mhm.
and it doesn't always work that way. Um, on my
Understand.
syllabi, I put failure is an option, but
Mm.
not trying isn't. This idea that we're gonna push ourselves and we just got to explore and experiment. And if it goes belly up, it goes belly up.
Mhm.
Don't worry about the grade. If you do something that's amazingly horrible, that just train wreck, if you're in here doing it, that's what your grade is going to be based on, not the outcome. And
Mhm.
that's a hard concept for students to understand.
Adults as well. Students. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's our concept for a lot of people, regardless of age. How do you balance it all? Because balance is often a challenge for creatives.
Wow. Yeah. I think about it in terms of day job, especially during the summer. For a period of time, I had my email on my phone, my school email on my phone. And then my phone stopped working one day. And I'm like, I got to get rid of this because the security software on campus was not dealing with my phone, and my phone wasn't dealing with it. So I got rid of it. And it was like,
Mhm.
it was liberating.
Really?
Like, yeah, if I have to check my school email, I have to sit down and consciously turn it on and bring it up and read it. Um,
Mm.
2 weeks ago was the first time in many weeks I had 782 emails or something, horrifically large like that. Thank goodness most of them it was just delete, delete, delete. But there were a few things that oops. Um, but balancing it. um you know i I get up every morning, and my studio is in the house. This is a large was a large bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And, I get up and I walk into my studio with my coffee. And there are days that I don't leave. It's 4 o'clock in
Mm-hmm.
the afternoon. I'm still in my, my shorts and my t-shirt. My coffee is cold as stone and I'm starving because I forgot to eat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's days that I have to go to class, but I still come in and I look around and I'm like, okay, all right, what about this? What about this? And I have set up my school schedule such that on my Tuesdays and my Thursdays, I'm off campus at noon. So I can come home and I can get 3, 4, 5 hours of studio time. And studio time could
Mm-hmm.
be physically painting, it could be developing something, it could be applying to a gallery or to a juried show or something. And then all day, I don't teach on Fridays. So I have all day Friday just to get up and be in my studio. Um, my wife, she owns a used bookstore. So Saturdays and Sundays, she's at the bookstore. So
Mm-hmm.
I have Thursday afternoon, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that I can do this. So
Mm-hmm.
when I'm, on the times that I have to be on in at school, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a really good balance. It keeps me out of my head from, just going too crazy in the studio. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to interact with humans. Um, the thing that I'm finding now, especially I had shoulder surgery, and now
Mm-hmm.
I have to work and do exercises. It's finding the time to um, really focus on, oh, I need to do yoga. I need to go for a walk. I need to do these other things. And so I get up in the morning and okay, I'm gonna go for my walk, especially
Mm-hmm.
during this summertime. I then come home and I can do my Duolingo and I can do my
Mm-hmm.
coffee and play with the dog, and then I can go into the studio and do that. And literally when we get done, I will be going and thinking about doing some yoga before I go to bed because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, okay, I should be doing and I know that when I exercise more, I'm more productive in the studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's wonderful that you're able to not only create a schedule, but understand the impact the schedule and your activities have on your productivity and your creative
Yes.
output. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Then there's weeks that, oh, I'm going to New York or I have to go to Michigan and see my mom or do all of these things that all of a sudden, it takes another week to get back into that routine because everything
Mm-hmm.
is off. And,
Mm-hmm.
so, in theory, it's good, but in practice, it doesn't always work that way.
What do you want your legacy to be?
When I read that question, I was like, oh my God, I have no idea.
Really?
Yeah, I'm I always enjoy, when somebody buys my work and, it's always like, yeah, okay, awesome. But I would rather give my work to a public institution to have
Mm-hmm.
it available to to be viewed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the ultimate goal of every artist is to get the work out there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily need to see it above a sofa or in a small, private collection, but
Mm-hmm.
in a larger sense, in a museum or a small museum, large museum, whatever, so many people can enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
That has always been kind of a goal. But when I began to read about or think about, what should my legacy be? That I did more good than harm in the world. We say things because we're upset, we're mad, we're sitting in traffic, and we honk the horn and that person is having a worse day than I am and now
Mm-hmm.
they're even having a worse day and working with students has really I think affected that whole notion that more and more people are getting tested for fill in the blank issues,
Mhm,
mental
mhm,
issues, health issues.
mhm,
Um, and it's, I think, more important to be human with them than to, we have a deadline. You have to have this,
mhm,
and I hope my work is good in the sense of it's colorful. Yes, there's
mhm,
meaning behind all of it, but if you don't want to go there, you can just enjoy the,
mhm, mhm.
the visual and just leave it at that.
Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience that I have not asked you?
I don't know. We've talked so much about so many different things.
Mhm,
You know, I'll leave it with something I talk to students about and how it really relates to me. When a student comes in and they don't know what to major in, I'm like, well, don't worry
mhm,
about majoring. What do you love to do?
mhm,
If you love to scuba dive, make that your life and find the major that's going to help make that a reality. You know, we I see so many kids, well, I'm gonna, major in business or accounting or so you want to be an accountant. Well, yeah. I'm sure there are people that wake up in the morning and go, I got to go do accounting some and I'm really thrilled for them, but I don't know any of them. We need them. You are our lifeblood.
mhm,
But I think if people find their passion, even if you find it later in life, whatever that means, it's not, it's never too late
mhm,
to turn and do something different. Go out and find your community, find the place or the places, the career that's right for you, not that's going to make you the most money, because happiness is not a thing you can buy.
mhm,
Happiness is in here. And when you find it, it's because you're following your inner voice as opposed to, I need to make more money. Well, why?
mhm.
Because you need a bigger house? Nah.
It's powerful, absolutely powerful. Patrick, thank you so much for being on the show. I am extremely grateful. Thank you for sharing your
Thank you.
journey with us, and I hope you'll join us again.
Oh, I would love to. Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you left feeling inspired and energized to follow your own path with purpose and creativity. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep living your purpose.